Good afternoon and welcome to NECIC's AALI Speaks podcast. I am Tony Chinney, NECIC's interim CEO. I'm being joined by my colleague Aurelio Diaz, our community organizer, and our Minority Business Assistance Center Director, Alan Mitchell, and one of our founding board members, Ms. Carol Payton. Thanks for joining us today. We're here to talk about Kwanzaa.
Happy to be here.
So, tell us a little bit about Kwanzaa, Alan.
So, Kwanzaa is a made-up holiday, and I thank Dr. Karanga that he made it up. I think that it's a wonderful opportunity to really focus on some founding principles that we should all be grounded in as we try to work in or have. In my case, God worked through me in order to accomplish what I want to see, or what I hope He wants to see happen on earth. But it's those principles are Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujamaa, Nia, Kumba, and Imani. So it's unity, it's self-determination, it's collective work and responsibility, it's cooperative economics, it's purpose, it's creativity, and it's faith. And so those are pretty general guiding principles that we should embrace in our lives and encourage in our children to celebrate in our daily walk. And thought it was a pretty safe space to be in terms of encouraging the community to take a moment of reflection before the new year. Kwanzaa was a huge part of my life growing up. Not that it was celebrated religiously, but it was celebrated in community. I happened to grow up in a pretty liberal community that offered me the opportunity to go to Shule on Saturdays and learn a little bit of Kiswahili. And those students that would gather there in African Heritage House would help us to have the tools to celebrate Kwanzaa, and as well as an understanding and a purpose. And for celebrating and sharing that with our parents, those professors and those individuals that were our parents, and they would gather in community and even in other people's homes and with other people's families, and we would celebrate great food. And it was really something that came out of what at the time for me was a Pan-African political perspective. Mm-hmm. It was a perspective that people throughout the diaspora that were separated in terms of the Middle Passage being sold from port to port, were able to get together around some central concepts that would allow us to kind of expand a shared consciousness, maybe help to build unity in each community, and help to see each other as brothers and sisters around the world, and help to unite a diaspora. Mm-hmm. So I think that in this time of political division and those types of things, those are principles that we should probably be looking back to or looking to reignite so that we can have stronger outcomes for our children and for ourselves. And I probably have been too long-winded in trying to tell you about
that's okay. There's a lot to talk about.
But yeah, bringing us here. So I posted, as we always do, a series of Facebook messages encouraging everybody to celebrate Kwanzaa in the same way that we've posted content in the past. The only difference was that I was live this time, so we got some different reaction than I would have anticipated that I felt like it would be an opportunity to talk about, because it didn't go viral, but we definitely got more views. And so, why don't we celebrate more Kwanzaa? Why did we get some political backlash? What's going on in our community? Is this an opportunity to further a message? Is this an opportunity to define something that's bigger than ourselves? It's definitely an opportunity. So brighter minds than mine around this table can help me figure it out.
Well, I would say that all the values that you espoused, that Kwanzaa or not, seem like good things to get behind. regardless of what you believe. So I think that's all good stuff. But Ms. Payton, you were sharing with us some of your personal history around Kwanzaa.
Yeah, I did. Several years ago, I think I participated in Kwanzaa activity with UMADAP, with the Mansfield Public Library, and and also in the schools, I did some things. But I think that even in spite of the responses that we got, I think it's important to know, this is kind of interesting perspective, to know that somebody's watching. You know, we have to think about it that way too. You know, that regardless of the comments, somebody is watching. So we have an opportunity to make the glass half full on this and continue. Maybe the first steps are steps that are showing some negative responses from people. And regardless of what you're doing, you're always going to get another perspective, somebody else's view. But somebody's watching, and I think that's important. And it's incumbent upon us to make some good steps going forward. Let's use this as an opportunity to jump off into something else. There's some schools out there with young people that are sitting, there are clubs, there are organizations. You know, Kwanzaa in 2025 can be very different. In 2024, we just did a series of Alan talking about it and sharing it. You know, let's make 2025 better by connecting and expanding even more, and not get bogged down by those negative Nellies, if you will, that are out there shouting from the rooftops. That's probably 10 of them. You know, there's probably 25,000 out there that want to hear more.
I like that it became a learning tool, because, you know, I know about Kwanzaa, but there's a lot that I don't know either, you know? We had a discussion prior to coming here, like questioning the knowledge and of the younger generation. With social media, you think that there'd be people a lot more knowledgeable or even practicing Kwanzaa, and so that's a big question I'd like to know more about too. But reading the comments today, a lot of it was surprising, a lot of it wasn't, because of where we are as a nation, where we are politically. But I really think that the principles that Kwanzaa lays forth is just about common decency and growth. And so it is kind of perplexing when you see people reacting in a manner that just doesn't make any sense at all. But I do think, you know, like Mrs. Payton said, it's also bringing the positive to light to people who are seeing those things, because people are paying attention, which is a good thing. So I think there's the power of educating people and ending some ignorance, and hopefully in the process shedding light on what Kwanzaa is, and especially within the African American community.
You know, growing up as I did, I was taught very early about what was a one-drop rule. And so that meant that if you had one drop of black blood, then you were considered to be black. You were African American or so. And so it's been interesting to see perhaps this advent of the other box, and that separation from that definition of blackness, that definition of pride in something that was inclusive in terms of an African American culture. Because to see all of the people of mixed ethnicity and our communities, you would think that more people would be celebrating Kwanzaa in order to, because of the universality of the principles, instead of fewer. So my hope is that through conversation and through inclusion and through messaging, you know, those are ways that we can encourage the assets that are in our community to come together in unity in order to be able to help us, or help any CIC if you're talking about those blocks, but if you're talking about more regionally, just to help us to come back together as a community, as a nation.
I think even there was conversations a few hours ago about just interesting dynamics when it comes to interracial, inter-ethnic groups. that conflict there can be just as greater as an outside race or ethnic group that is, spewing something, but it's so multiracial these days. Growing up here in Mansfield, it was always like, black students, white students, and you had a few biracial. Now, it's like, it's definitely multiracial. You walk into the city schools, I'm like, wow, you're trying to figure out if the child is Latino, Middle Eastern, you just don't know. And I like that richness, but I like what you said too is with that one drop or few drops, I think, I'm trying to say here is knowing your history and also knowing, we talked about Mrs. Payton, like her experience in the 60s and one of the controversial things that people, have against Kwanzaa is it hasn't been around for a long, long, long time, So knowing that history, I think, would be a good thing too.
It's funny. I guess more and more people talk about it because it's so fresh, so young. I mean, its creator is still with us, I believe. And so we call this a made-up holiday, but then we embrace the capitalism of Santa Claus and the commercial. The elf on the shelf is a thing.
Which I believe the Santa Claus that we have was a Coca-Cola invention.
Oh, okay.
The image that we have currently.
Santa Claus, elf on the shelf. There's a Frosty the Snowman, with all of those celebratory types of things. So I feel like there's an opportunity to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly enough room for all of it. And I think you talk about the differences with all the young people. For example, wouldn't it be great to bring them together and whatever their ethnicity is, what are their celebrations? Because there's some very rich celebrations that go on in communities and ethnic groups other than African American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can see Kwanzaa being a component of something even bigger, which speaks to the whole issue of unity. Mm-hmm. Celebrating our differences is important too. We tend to want to we end up in a rut of being, if I didn't invent it, then it's not good. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the whole issue of diversity. That's what makes things strong, mm-hmm. our differences. Mm-hmm. And just because we're different doesn't make it wrong. Yeah. And it should not be judged.
And I like, one thing we've talked about within our community, we definitely use 2023 as a reference point to the challenges of youth violence and mental health and just a lot of young people who don't even know what kind of path they're on. They're on all mm-hmm. kinds of erratic, painful journeys. And so it can be a little bit confusing when, these, Alan laid out these amazing principles that can apply to anyone. And I think
absolutely.
So it doesn't have to be like a week. And
mm-hmm.
I think now would be the time for those individuals, young and older, to this can really help people. Not just help you, but have you question what those principles really are, how you can incorporate into your life. So I think Kwanzaa is more than just a week-long, awareness or celebration. It really should be
exactly.
A mentality and a way of life to be. And I think now is the time more than ever for people to learn about it and practice it.
Right. If you take the title of Kwanzaa away, and you simply use the principles.
Yeah.
There isn't one person walking this earth that can't benefit from what the principles are teaching us.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
And I think going back to what you mentioned earlier, Alan, what we see is a kind of commodification and a homogenization of American culture into just this commercialism instead of the value of whether it's an ethnic, cultural tradition. It's similar even to like sort of how you used to have regional food and regional music, and now that's just gone. I mean, or it's underground in a way that it's just not. You could go to a little town somewhere and eat something you've never had before, but now there's a Lexington Spring Mill Road in every little town with just like a Xerox of that same thing everywhere. But I would argue that that's happening in culture too, all around. So I think that going back to any form of this kind of stuff is powerful and important. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's actually a meal that's shared. Some people do it on the first night of Kwanzaa with a unity meal. Some people do it on the last night of Kwanzaa, celebrating faith, and it's a New Year's Day tradition. But there's so we're celebrating different foods from all throughout the diaspora, and so I don't know about you guys, but I can always eat.
No, definitely.
We'll talk about something that brings people together. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's universal.
Yeah. So in terms of celebrating and getting people together for 2025, let's see who can. Maybe we can have a sweet potato pie bake-off, or maybe we can have some Jaffe rice or something.
I'll be a judge.
Yeah, there you go. Come on.
Now,
First
do we
in line.
know if there is, does our community, any organization, larger group, larger community or church, do you know of any that have actively celebrated Kwanzaa? And I remember hearing about it quite a bit back in the day. And, I know sometimes the library would like have a few like awareness booths and stuff like that. But
I think the only one that did in the past that I'm remembering was UMADAP at one point. They had like a week-long celebration with kids. And there would be the big dinner or whatever it was afterwards. At the end, it was usually at the end. But that's the only group I've known.
I think that's definitely who you want to begin with. These young, formidable people in terms of like instilling these principles, but not overlook everyone else. But my hope would be that with the upcoming year, that it is celebrated. It's more vibrant and visual for the community to know about. And I think that'll definitely help deter people from spewing racist comments and hatefulness and ignorance.
I think there's, just like the poor will always be around, you're always going to have your haters. You can't have
That's right.
a message of positivity without having somebody want to detract from it. So I don't think that in this current political atmosphere, red versus blue, we're going to see that go away entirely. But those efforts can be made from a community organizing type of, from an asset-based type of thing, to get our circles together and see who might be wanting to help us to make that happen.
For sure.
Well, I think, one of the things that is apparent to me is it feels like it's sprung on people. It's right after Christmas and you're sitting there, you've had St. Nick and whoever the other folks are that are part of the made-up holiday. And people are not in a headspace, the right headspace. It's kind of like, can you talk about the principles all year long in some forms? And then we are going to come together as a group and celebrate Kwanzaa, because you're just teaching it for a week.
Yeah.
So people really, especially young people, don't understand how to integrate it. They don't even know. They're living Kwanzaa principles every day. So it's kind of like if there was a process that would help them understand it as we're moving through the year. And then the Kwanzaa celebration becomes a culmination.
Yeah, I like that, because it's kind of like, that's a week-long celebration. And it's sort of like the same model of, this month's going to be this awareness, this month's going to be this awareness, where you celebrate it, but then you kind of forget about it, whether it's like autism awareness, Black History awareness, Heritage Month. So I think, if there were ways to keep it going, keeping it fresh and educational all the time, so that when it does come towards either that week or that month, there's more support and more knowledge about it.
I think that NECIC does a good job being about it. I don't think they
that's
do a good
exactly
job
right.
talking about it.
Yeah.
The whole concept of having a community development corporation with an asset-based community development strategy is to create unity, to be able to mobilize people in order to create action around things that they care about, whether it's a community center or whether there are other things. The whole idea about self-determination is to be able to empower children, to be able to empower adults, whether they're returning citizens from incarceration here on the North End, where we've got a couple of prisons, or whether they're young people who are trying to figure out what life's going to be about. They're constantly engaging with programming in order to create opportunities for youth, whether it's our Summer Manufacturing Institute or whether it's programming that they can participate in while they're incarcerated, come out and get jobs in agriculture and other type, and the workforce development that we're trying to do through staffing. And then so you look at collective work and responsibility, and you look at the community cleanups and the different things that NECIC tries to do around neighborhood beautification, even organizing around blight mitigation. You look at cooperative economics, and you talk about the things, the grants that NECIC applies for, the programming, having a minority business assistance center from the Ohio Department of Development to encourage that ability for entrepreneurship. You think about NIA and purpose and all the different ways in which NECIC is trying to create purposes in people's lives by, like MBK, the work that you work on with My Brother's Keeper, and making sure that people recognize that there's a purpose for their lives, and young people have an opportunity to be able to engage in a bigger understanding of what that looks like, not just from a political point of view, but from a community point of view.
Yeah.
And then you've got Kumba and creativity, and so all the different ways that NECIC partners and fosters creativity within engaging with chefs and artists and different types of people. And then you've got a faith-based council that comes and they meet quarterly in order to talk about what each other are doing within the community. So I feel like we
We're
don't
there.
necessarily talk about it, but we're being about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Exactly.
maybe the idea is just to talk about it a little bit better.
I agree.
To help people label it
Mhm.
so that it doesn't feel like it's something that came up for a week.
Yeah.
The elder program is a classic
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. You've got 70 elders, as a captive audience in terms of the kinds of things that they do. We need to make sure that those are continued. And you can say to people, like you just spent a couple minutes, fitting the things that we do, whether they're programming or efforts or directions, under the principles. And that's not a connection that people make. So we need to help them make that.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of will disperse fear, and people won't, those 10 people that are part of the lunatic fringe, they won't be so quick to say that, okay, this could be negative, because they have no idea. We just aren't putting the label on it.
Yeah.
We just need to name it.
I think
As you said, we're about it. We just need to name it.
Well, it's the Nguzu Saba.
Right.
So, but when
7
you say
principles.
something, but when you say something that sounds foreign,
Oh, yeah. People push back.
yeah.
That's true.
Yep.
Or they talk about things like they invented that. No, they didn't invent that.
Yeah.
Maybe the programming, the actual frame around it, but it's the way we need to live our lives.
But the most interesting part of those things they were focusing on, there was no mention or, of the principle itself. It's
No.
just like they missed everything. He was just
Well,
like,
there's
here's
never
missed it.
substance to
yeah,
any of this
never
stuff. It's
substance.
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's unfortunate because if they miss that, they miss a whole lot.
Yeah.
They're missing a whole lot in life.
Mhm.
It's funny how organically all of those, all of those 7 principles from the Nguzu Saba come out in the plan when we're doing our community. What's it called? Neighborhood Up now? Or
It's a
Act?
Neighbor Up, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's a neighborhood action.
It's had a couple of different names.
But Neighbor Up is, yeah.
Yes, but organically with the surveys, the platform, all of those things come out for different people individually, and we just don't talk about it that way.
Right. We don't use the language.
Mhm.
It would be interesting to see if we started using the language.
Yeah. I love it. They're beautiful words. I mean, I'm down for it. Let's spread the word and encourage utilization.
Pass the plate, not the ammunition, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that I always go back to it's a lack of education or a focus on the wrong parts of education. When you don't, I'm biased, but when you don't learn your history, I don't know what we expect from our young people, that they're not going to understand the world they live in any meaningful way.
And they will continue to make mistakes.
And then, yeah, they'll stand for something or you'll fall for anything. You know, you got to have something
Exactly
to believe in, and they're out there to give them something if it's not the right thing.
Right, exactly.
It's funny that when I look at this particular community development corporation, so many of the programs, so much of the work that's being done is focused on people trying to utilize the resources that they have in order to build themselves up, whether they're agricultural, whether it's get a job and come to NECIC staffing, whether it's take your knowledge and skill base and open a business so that you can become the employer. They seem very fundamental to the core of what our Republican friends, our red friends on the right would want to see happening in their community. And to their credit, so many of them contribute and actively work towards the efforts of an NECIC. The population of the census tracts that NECIC represents, it's not overwhelmingly African American. But because we are inclusive and not exclusive, then it seems as if some of that messaging might be getting, I guess, mislabeled.
Yeah, it's a misperception. I think just perception becomes reality. It's a black neighborhood, quote unquote. But it's not.
And everyone's very, possessive and territorial of their neighborhood, and just when we do our work out in the community and we're canvassing, whether it's having surveys being done or getting input, just even trying to, encourage people who live in the Roseland, Little Kentucky area. They know this is the North End too. Now the North End, they think that the North End is just Johns Park or North, and then vice versa. So, but just a few months ago we were talking about the different dynamics of racially the makeup of the North End. It's much different in the past few years. But I think, again, that's a learning tool when you are approaching people closely in neighborhoods or businesses. And they might have those biases or those thoughts, and I think there's a lot of possibility and change in that by including them in it. I've seen the power of that just in our own community. But it's harder for some people, but they have to want it too.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting observation, because it's so true. People don't want to be a part of the North End.
Yeah.
The people who live on the North End don't want to be a part of the North End because of the negative connotations that are associated. But when we draw the maps and when we look at census tracts, we are including so much of Mansfield.
Yep.
So much of Mansfield. And if we can somehow or other go back to making people understand, this is a part of our city that's critical, that we want to continue to build up. It's not just Johns Park.
Yep.
It's not just Longview. To your point, it's Roseland.
Yeah.
There's some parts of, am I going the right direction?
Towards the fairgrounds,
East Mansfield.
Yeah.
Right.
It's huge.
That are there. And we need to go back to having people recognize that.
Yeah.
And using the assets that are in those particular areas. We're not tapping them. We've kind of evolved into a smaller group, and I don't want us to buy into that perception.
Yeah.
I think it's bigger than that too, because just like I was talking about, we are distancing ourselves from our blackness in a way to kind of embrace a surrogate culture that puts whiteness on a pedestal. We are also very much kind of distancing ourselves from our economic reality. You've got some CEOs that are making way more than their employees in a disproportionate way that we've never seen in the United States. And so you've got people who are really, really not able to be truthful with themselves about the economic reality that they find themselves in. They don't want to look at their paycheck and their resources and find out that, the box that they have to check on their 1040 at the end of the year classifies them as being poor or
Yeah.
low to moderate income.
Yeah.
I was talking to a young lady today, just this morning, and we were talking about prescription costs or something, generic drugs versus whatever. And she said, my company, her HR person, told her she was part of the poor middle class,
Wow.
which was a term I hadn't heard before. And then when she described it, I thought, yes, you are a part of the poor middle class, if that's a terminology that can be used.
There is no middle class.
Right.
That's
Disappeared
what
quickly.
happened.
The poor.
That's
You're
what
part of the poor.
So,
She was talking about people who qualify or wasn't able to qualify. She wasn't able to qualify for prescription discounts. And, looking at her medicine, it was killing her in terms of the cost
Absolutely.
of the medicine that she had to buy. She said, I can't afford this.
see, and if people would just take that anger that they have that's misappropriated towards their brothers and sisters and,
Right.
and take it towards the people that are ripping us all off. These people are criminals and they need to be dealt with.
Or pardoned.
Well, one way or another.
Or pardon.
Or, I don't know.
Too soon?
Interesting. And all of this comes from a discussion on Kwanzaa.
See how it all unravels?
But it all comes together. It all
It
comes
does. It's all related.
Mhm.
It's all related. But I can see things happening. To just go back for a minute. When I think of next year, given this conversation of the possibilities that we could do, that could happen as a
Yeah.
result of this, as a result of the negative Nellies who said something about our Kwanzaa Live post. And I thought, but really some neat things that can come as a result
Yeah.
of this.
And I'm sitting here thinking about, like, as we approach the new year, and we've been talking about just really going forward with a lot more grassroots energy, like we did before. And yeah, this is the time to do it now. And whether it's incorporating it Neighbor Up or having potlucks at our community outreach center, and just bringing all those sides of the North End together. And when you bring them together, we can talk about a lot of things. Not just their concerns or their areas of improvement that they want to see change, but these principles and other things. So yeah, I think we're gonna have a great year as an NECIC family for sure.
As I look back at the history, the North End used to be an economic powerhouse. And it's got that potential. It had factories, it had all kinds of different jobs for service industry. It has that potential again, given some things that are happening regionally. My hope is that these types of conversations spawn people to give, so that NECIC can eventually have that Manchester Bidwell style community impact center, so that we can skill up that workforce to be able to really, work ourselves out of a job, make sure that people are thriving and doing well again.
I've always said my goal is to shut NECIC down. We're done. We fixed the North End. Quality of life is up. Everybody's wealthy now. We're good.
Okay, and on that note,
Then we need an SECIC. Have one
That's
for
right.
each side of each end of the city.
Start on the other end of the town.
Yeah.
So,
Here we come, Southside.
we become the model that's
Yeah.
used.
Yeah.
indeed.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for sitting down and talking with us, and
Awesome.
thanks for joining us out there in podcast land. And we'll see you next time.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Okay.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy New Year.
All of that. Take care.